They said it couldn't be done. They laughed at me when I told them what I was going to do. But tonight, live in the Diff studio, we are going to do the circular economy in, yes, just 30 minutes. Well, what a challenge it is. How can you possibly teach someone about the circular economy in just 30 minutes? People say it's impossible. So I asked the Diff team to get me two of the greatest minds who could help me through this journey. And I have to say, they came up trumps. They gave me Emma Fromberg and Marco Maloney, two of my colleagues from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Someone had to cheer Emma. Thank you very much. Marco, can we do the circular economy in 30 minutes?
I'm very confident about it.
Are you watching the time?
I have no clock, no watch.
Do you?
Yeah.
I have a clock here.
Okay.
You're wasting time, Emma. We're already 2 minutes into this. Emma, 30 minutes? Can we do it in the 30 minutes or 28?
Maybe.
Maybe. Let's see. Marco, I know you want to start off by telling us, curiously, what the circular economy is not.
Yeah, well, that's probably the best way to understand the circular economy, understanding what it isn't. So right now we live in a linear economy. And what is the linear economy? The linear economy is a system where we take resources from the ground, we make things out of them, we use them, and then we throw them away, losing all the value, all the effort that's been put into them, all the energy that's gone in there, and also all the materials that were part of those products.
I believe we have a little image that we can show that shows what this linear economy that we're living in looks like. There it is on the screen right there.
Yeah?
Kapow.
I'm not seeing it. Oh, there.
They are, take, make, dispose. So that's what the linear economy is all about. And you're saying this is what the circular economy is not, and it's important to define the difference between two different systems, I guess, is what we're saying here.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, Emma, so if the circular economy is not take, make, dispose, if you had to sort of summarize what it is in just a quick phrase that people can understand, what would you say it is?
I would describe it as regenerative by design, in which our resources that we use, that we in a linear economy dispose ultimately, we continuously cycle those in a system. And we can do that through changing the design of products, and that was initially how the circular economy inspired me as a designer. We can change how we make things, so we can actually, after we finished using them, reuse them again in another shape or form, or maybe reuse them again as a product itself. So there are many ideas in that space that are very inspiring to designers.
And you've used the word design several times actually in that quick summary. Why is design so important when it comes to looking at a system like the circular economy?
I think it really embraces the complexity. So in a linear system, we look more often at more simplified, simplistic ways of dealing with resources. We extract them from the ground, we use them in products, and then we use them and dispose them like there is an infinite supply, and we can just. There is an away when we throw them away. They just end up somewhere else. And in a circular economy, I think we really embrace that complexity around what the impact is of design, of products, of services, of the system, on multiple levels, on not only for businesses or the economy, but also for society and the environment. And we look at the complexity and how they influence each other in different levels.
I think I've got a picture of you embracing the complexity of the circular economy. Just there.
Also very pixelated. It's so low res. You cannot stop using that image, can you?
Well,
thank God you didn't use one of your previous edits on that one.
But I mean, jokes aside,
yeah.
What I hear you saying is that I'm going to take that picture off for your
Thank
benefit. What I hear you saying is that it's kind of like it's a mindset shift, right? Because we of course as Marco put it, we live in a linear world. We design all sorts of clever goods that are around us that we're using all of the time, right?
Yeah.
But we're surely changing the way we think about this product design, about systems design when it comes to circular economy.
Yeah, I think we will look at it much more as, you know, if I do something else will happen, maybe in different ways. Like, you know, if I create a product, if I'm a supermarket owner and I have plastic bags, these plastic bags end up in, you know, in oceans, polluting our oceans, and then getting back into fish, and then ultimately we might eat that same fish, eating our own plastic bags that we used in the soup. So these are ultimately all connected.
So Marco, the circular economy is about eliminating waste?
And I think something that Emma mentioned, it's about thinking beyond the first use, beyond a single use, thinking further, designing for how things can stay in use for longer and how we can keep those materials, those quality materials in the economy for as long as possible.
You've just used the word of the year, have you not, Marco?
I think I have.
Tell us about the word of the year.
Throw it in. Yeah.
Well, actually, I found out this morning that Colin's dictionary, and not our Colin, unfortunately, selected single use as the word of the year based on, the situation with plastics, with single-use plastics ending up in the ocean, and as Emma said, being unfortunately taken up by living organisms such as fish, seabirds, and creating all sorts of problems.
Okay, quick word to the folks at home. This is the Disruptive Innovation Festival, which means we are interactive. You're watching this online. Pitch in with your thoughts and questions. Let's try and catch these circular economy experts out tonight with something especially tricky. Or if you disagree, of course, with what they say, let us know there too. And I will put your thoughts and comments to this pair as the session goes on. I've got a man sitting somewhere who's feeding me all your thoughts and questions online. So use the hashtag ThinkDiff or put your questions and comments into the page you're watching this on. We've talked about complexity, we've talked about designing out waste. We haven't talked about economics, and economy is in the title, circular economy. Emma, why is economy an important part of this story?
Well, I personally believe that through the economy we can create positive spin-offs on society and the environment, and especially with the tools that we have now, such as AI, Internet of Things, but also the learnings that we get from if we learn from nature, biomimicry, nature-inspired design, we can create a lot of feedback loops, and we can learn massively about what we put out there and what is actually the consequence of the products, services, and systems that we put out there in the economy, and how are people reacting on it? How what are the positive and negative spin-offs to society and the environment, and how can we change that, and how can we make that even better? So yeah, I think it does start with designing something fundamentally good throughout its entire life cycle, from the economy, and then with positive spin-offs.
Okay, now complexity. Let's get past that one, Emma. When people talk about circular economy, they often refer to what's called the butterfly diagram. This is something that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation produced many years ago now. I believe there was an academic conference once where they tried to ban the use of this because it was used so frequently.
That, yeah.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it really permeates when people talk about circular economy. There's been many attempts by other organisations to create something a bit like this. And we're always in discussion about the appropriateness of some of the elements in here. What we'd like to do, because it's so ubiquitously used, we'd like to try and talk through a little bit about what we see on here. Yep. And I guess giving a quick bit of background info for you two to talk about why you're going to talk about each side of it. Emma's going to talk about the technical cycles, all the stuff with the blue icons, in part because you've got a background as a product designer. And Marco, you're going to talk about everything that's on the left-hand side of this diagram, the biological side, in part because you're working on a report right now around cities and food.
That's right.
You're a biological expert.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, let's find out.
We'll see.
So as a basic intro then, if we look down the spine of this graphic, we've got, in essence, the linear economy. We take resources out of the ground, we make them into something, and they end up in the hands of people, and people typically in a linear economy throw them away when it gets to end of use because the goods have been designed in such a way. But we want to minimize what gets thrown away and instead put everything into these loops that flow out from the user or the consumer. And Emma, you're going to talk us through some of the steps on the right-hand side of this diagram. First up, why do we say user instead of consumer? We always talk about people being consumers, but here it says they're users.
Yeah, so in the technological cycle, you have technological materials. So those are all materials that are not biological materials, so all the things that do not compost or biodegrade, and Marco will talk about that later on. But things like plastics, glass, metals, they're all technical materials. And and they should stay in the techno cycle, which means that ideally we reuse those. So if we have them in a product such as this cup, we want to keep them at this level because this has the highest integrity. And as long as you can use the cup, that's great. And maybe you need to maintain it or repair it, and then you can refurbish or remanufacture it. And as a last resort option, you have recycling. So we look at like basically these closer loops, these smaller loops, because you keep the integrity of the product when you look at reusing them or repairing them. But ideally, it should also be designed to, at the end of life, flow back into the system and be reused again. So why do we talk about users? Because you wouldn't consume the product. You would only have access to it in that current shape or form.
You don't consume a tablet, right?
Yeah. It has to go somewhere, and we want to keep it within the system.
So in essence, the closer the loop is to the user, the better sense it makes in terms of materials and knock on in terms of economics or economy.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's understood. And we could talk through lots of examples of various products or various organizations who are using those different loops. But given 14 minutes have passed, I think we're going to have to leave that for the folks at home to look at our circular economy learning journey, which is part of the Disruptive Innovation Festival this year. Look out for the learner journey on the homepage of ThinkDiff, and you can learn all sorts of interesting stuff about the background to the circular economy, these various loops and case studies and all sorts of stuff. But I digress, because we're over to you now, Marco. The biological side, if the technical side is about keeping the product close to the user, does that work on the biological side as well?
Well, it's a bit different. In the biocycle, we're talking about life essentials, such as food. And food, unlike tablets, we consume, we don't use it. There are some products in the biocycle, such as textiles or furniture, building material, think of wood, that you could say we use, we don't consume. But another thing that's typical about the biocycle is that everything, all those materials, all those products are made of or from living organisms. And just as they're produced by living organisms, they're also biodegradable. They can be broken down into the molecules that compose them and either be taken up into other organisms, will regenerate it into something else, or they can be used to restore natural habitats. And for example, think of organic waste being used as organic fertilizer. I use the word waste, but we can also just talk about it as nutrients or organic resources. So it's quite different from the technical cycle. At the same time, we do have a lot of industries and things that are very, that you could think are part of the technical cycle. Think of the food processing industry, textile industry, and think about waste management, organic resource management. So it's quite different, but still the idea of cycling our nutrients and using the nutrients that we use in the best way possible still applies.
And there's that phrase, isn't there, waste equals food, which speaks for both cycles, but it seems even more appropriate for the biological cycle.
That's totally right. Our organic waste is the food of organisms.
I think you want to tell us about Ecovative. Give us a case study, because someone, Rachel, said here, what are some of the examples of the circular economy in action already today? I know you wanted to say something about Ecovative, so, where does that fit? And tell us about it quickly.
So that's a really interesting company, and what they're doing is using mycelium, that's fungi. They're feeding mushrooms, that's right. But it's the mycelium are like these small fibers that are part of mushrooms, and they use those fibers in packaging. They feed this fungi organic waste or agricultural byproducts, so in a way reducing waste. And they're using it for all sorts of materials, but a typical example is packaging, and they're replacing plastic packaging that, as we know, if it ends up in the sea, it can create all sorts of problems. If this Ecovative mycelium packaging ends up in the sea, it just naturally biodegrades. And that highlights, I think, another key aspect of the biocycle, that things can leak. While in the technical cycle, if you have plastics, tablets ending up in the environment, that's not a good thing. It has all sorts of negative consequences. In the biocycle, that's less damaging. Of course, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't just throw away organic waste anywhere, but it can be used in a beneficial way, and it's less damaging anyways.
So it's about making products fit for the world, which is something we haven't really done before, right? We're awfully smart folks, but we haven't quite got to that stage where everything becomes a good for the way in which our planet operates and can deal with materials. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, I think so. If we use things like packaging that we just use for one time, and we make that out of plastic, which is like quite a high value type of product that can last extremely long, and we put that into systems that leak, then it's not fit for the purpose then, right?
That's true. Yes. Okay. The questions, like the Beckhams and a Concorde, are coming in thick and fast through the various places where you can send us questions. Twitter, the webpage you're watching this on, for example. We've got a really nice one here from Ricky, and this is a sort of big picture one. Isn't circular economy just another buzz term for recycling more, and for sustainability? Another buzzword, Emma?
I don't think so. I hope not, because buzzwords often have like an expiry date, and then there's something new. It definitely goes beyond recycling. What we already said is that it's like focusing on these inner loops and focusing on creating value, and through new business models and new type of technology, which just makes sense from how nature works. We basically learn from nature in how we need to create new products, services, and systems. And I think that is much more fundamental than recycling. So yeah, hopefully this is definitely not a buzzword.
But nevertheless, that is how a lot of people use the term circular economy. Right, that's a fair comment. That's probably why Ricky's asking it. Yeah,
no, definitely, and I think that's. There is a place for recycling in the circular economy, and it's I guess it's the aspect of the circular economy that is more present for people right now, is what they can see, and I guess that's why they associate it. But there's much more to a circular economy than that.
Okay, there's lots of other good questions, but I want to ask one of my really good questions right now, which is, Emma, this is a great example of an efficient system, is that right?
An efficient system?
An efficient system in operation. Is this what we're seeing here?
Why would you think it's an efficient system?
Well, I'm asking you. I'm the one who asked the questions.
Do you want me to say it's an effective system?
Well, you spoil it now.
You threw me off there. So hopefully it's not an efficient system. What we aim for with the circular economy is an effective system. And it's basically not doing less bad, so not putting less plastic into the ocean, not wasting less materials that are precious to us, but it's actually to do something good. So keeping them in the loop, continuously reusing the resources that we have, and minimizing leakage. So I think that is a fundamental difference between doing less bad and doing truly good. So efficiency and effectiveness. So we are trying to aim for effectiveness.
But efficiency can be a route to effectiveness. It can be, but ultimately the goal is how do we create an effective system?
Yeah,
and efficiency helps us get there.
I think you
Fine.
can learn a lot through trying to be efficient, and you can see what works and what doesn't work. But I think your aim should always be to, instead of doing less bad, because you're basically improving the wrong systems potentially. It's looking at the system itself, looking at the technology itself, and seeing what does this actually do. And instead of trying to make that less and less bad, either make that technology obsolete or replace it, or make it in such a way that it does good.
Super. 8 minutes to go.
Oh.
Goodness me, we're really up against it here, Marco.
We still have a game, right?
We have a game to come as well. Marco, Stephen Almond has asked a question I'm going to pitch to you right now. How can designers create truly circular products today when material science has to catch up? For example, adhesives and plywood make it unsuitable to biodegrade and return to the natural cycle, but there are limited suitable alternatives.
That's a great question, and there is a big role for innovation in enabling the circular economy. But sometimes I think it's not only about trying to replace things from the technical cycle with things from the biocycle, but it's rethinking the whole product system. And so for example, if maybe a different example with not adhesives, but with jeans, you can look. Jeans can be made from cotton, or they can be made from a mix of fibers, and it's about you can either try to replace functions or decide to change the design so it still fits a purpose.
Or if you look at glues, you can, instead of a glue, you can do a mechanical attachment.
Yeah.
So you can maybe click it in or click it off, and you design out the glue.
But there's also the point here, is there not, that this is aspirational. This is something that we're working towards, and perhaps the material science has to catch up. Yeah, so until it gets there, we know where we want to be, but we know the design philosophies we want to apply to our products so that they can fit into these cycles.
It's like a northern star.
Nice point, northern star. Okay, Emma let the cat out the bag. We've got a quiz coming up, a quiz for this pair, and I believe there's even a little jingle that goes along with it. So here goes.
Straight or round, straight or round.
Is it linear or is it circular?
So we consumed quite a few sherries last night, and that jingle, I think, was put together at that time. And perhaps the grammar here, Emma, you dropped a question mark off here. Surely linear or circular? We're wasting time by picking up your grammar.
Yes, let's continue.
I'm going to show you a product, and you're going to tell me if it's linear or if it's circular. Capuche. Number one, it's an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
That's surely a circular thing, right? They're good, electric vehicles.
Well, we're moving towards a mobility sector in which we desire to have more electric vehicles, but there are a lot of questions that we can ask around, for example, the batteries. Like, we do need a lot of lithium for those batteries, and already supply has been under pressure. It's difficult to recycle these batteries with lithium, so we do need to look at a more holistic system of mobility rather than just cars and just saying like all the cars that are on the road now, let's replace them with electric vehicles. That probably doesn't solve all the problems that we have with mobility. So we talked about this, and we also thought like to address these, you need to have a more holistic view on the mobility sector, looking at the public transportation system, but also, in the US they have a lot of scooters now within cities, bike sharing. So there are a lot of alternatives, also ride sharing, that could make this into something that works as a whole rather than just replacing one for the other.
But I would like to add something beyond that, like
you
systemic.
knock yourself out, mate. We've got 4 minutes to go.
Sorry, beyond that systemic consideration, that I think is a really good point that should be first considered. Electric cars can have a role, and they can also be a big enabler for example, a transition to a renewable energy system. by solving some of the problems such as energy storage that are typical, very well central of our renewable energy system.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I think sometimes it's good to think beyond the product itself as to the system, but also to the enabling things that this product can do.
It's an aspiration point again, isn't it? We want our vehicle fleet to be powered by renewable energy. This is the best we've got at the moment, and perhaps with battery design and so on, we can get there.
And I think you also learn as you do. You know, you try to implement these vehicles, and then you see what kind of problems you encounter, and then you improve on that. And it's about, you know, a solution that, you know, lives and develops. And I think, you know, we will come up with other ideas for how the mobility sector will look like, and that will also transform over the time.
Okay, that's I'm going to call it 1-0 to me so far. Next one is a fruit basket.
It looks nice.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, what do you think? Fruit basket surely is circular, right? This is a biological material. All's well here, Marco.
I mean, I think definitely fruits should be part of a circular economy. But a question that we need to think about here is, how are these fruits produced? Are they produced in a way that they help regenerate the soils? Right now, we're having a bit of a soil crisis, I think I should say. It's estimated that we have worldwide about 60 years of harvests left, because the way we're producing food is harming our soil, our topsoil. So how we produce the food, are we producing in a regenerative way for fruits, is something that needs to be considered. But I would say fruits should be part of a circular economy.
Absolutely should be. I'm going to give you one final one, and my choice, I'm going to washing machines. Emma, a washing machine is not part of a circular economy.
Well, ideally, like eventually you do, also in the circular economy, you need to wash your clothes, maybe. Depends on the system.
I hope so. All the windows are shut in here, I think.
When we look at washing machines, there are quite a lot of interesting ideas out there, such as paper wash. So, you know, if you want to wash something, you pay only for that wash, and you pay the original equipment manufacturer. That original equipment manufacturer will stay the owner of the washing machine, and it basically puts it in your house for, you know, that type of service contract where you basically, you just pay as you go. And then they can put a much more durable, much more longer lasting product in your house, because they don't have to sell you a new one every 12 years. But they basically cash on you as you use the product, and they can create a really high value, high performance product, and maybe upgrade it as you go too.
And here's what's so hard about introducing a circular economy in 30 minutes. You've only just now, as we approach 30 minutes, we've talked about different business models. Yeah. And there, you know, there's hours to talk about that type of thing, isn't there?
Yeah, so why 30 minutes, Colin?
It was his idea.
Oh.
So a couple of more questions. We're going to finish with two great questions we've got that come in from the online audience. So what I'm saying is, if we go over 30 minutes, it's your fault, people. Neil has asked us this: will corporations, small businesses, governments, or consumers, or others, lead the shift to a circular economy? Who has the ability to be the most disruptive? What are the biggest obstacles to change? That's three huge questions. Who's going to lead the charge, Marco?
I think everyone and anyone can lead the charge. I think there's a role for everyone in the transition, as we just saw here. There's businesses, for example, the producers of a washing machine. There's the farmers. There's even, you can think of consumers in their choices. Governments, of course, have an important role. So I would say everyone has a role. I don't know if, Emma, you have a more.
Yeah, I think we as a foundation do focus on companies and businesses, and I think we do need to get rid of saying, you know, the consumer is the one that makes bad choices. You know, I think that there is a massive role for businesses and governments and cities and regions to really look together at how they can make this work, and stop to put the blame onto the user and saying you make the wrong decisions, because, you know, they should have more options, good options to pick from. So yeah, I think that there is a massive role for other people than just the user.
Okay, final question of the night. It's from a chappie called Bledar. He says, as the logic of circular economy is so compelling, he's convinced, what do companies need to make the leap? New kinds of management, new resources and capabilities. Well, I guess my build on from Bledar's question is, why isn't everyone doing it? If this makes sense economically, if this makes sense environmentally, why isn't everyone doing it, Marco?
My answer is, I don't know.
Okay.
I think they should. I think the case is clear. I mean, changing things is never easy, and changing business models is challenging. But I think the tools are there to start changing the way we do things and start capturing the value that there is in the circular economy. Yeah.
I think it's a bigger risk to actually not change at this stage, to not explore what the opportunity is of a circular economy, because the world is changing, and the question is up to businesses like, are you gonna hop in this train that is, going to this more circular world, or are you gonna stay behind, and maybe with your business that becomes also very uninteresting for your customer or user. So it's really the question of why, you should definitely start your transition.
Okay, Emma Fromberg, Marco Maloney, thank you very much for joining us in this diff session tonight. Folks, they said it couldn't be done. They said we couldn't talk about the circular economy and introduce it in 30 minutes. And looking at the time, it turns out they were right. We've run 3 minutes overboard. I hope you'll forgive us for that. Thank you for your thoughts, your questions. So much more at the Disruptive Innovation Festival. I've mentioned our learner journey already. You'll find that on the homepage of ThinkDiff. And pretty much every single session that we've had today and yesterday is available for you to watch immediately right now on Catch Up. One session I want to point you toward for tomorrow morning, launching at about 9 a.m. Our very own Emma Fromberg has a podcast. It's well worth listening to. Some of the issues we've talked about tonight, safe and circular materials, is what Emma will be talking about in her podcast. I've heard it. It's excellent. It's well worth a listen. And that's available from 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. But for now, from me, Colin Webster, I'm going to say thank you for watching and good night.